welcome everybody. Our talk today is on prana, the essence of health and vitality. Our speaker is Dr. Olixn Adams. Dr. Adams is a board-certified practitioner of family medicine and practices holistic medicine at Southern Cross Hospital in Bandon, Oregon. He is also the director of the Pranada Wellness Center, which is housed at the Temple of Compassion in Burton, Texas. Our talk today is an offering of the Pranada Wellness Center. And Pranada Wellness is currently offering educational talks like this one, as well as a week-long healing immersion at the Temple of Compassion. Our next healing retreat will be March 15th through the 20th of 2025, this coming spring. And we will be putting a link in the chat where you can learn more about that program. Dr. Olixn will be there serving. I'll be there as well. We have an amazing team, and it's an amazing event. So again, welcome. Thank you, Olixn, for being here to share with us this talk today. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Rosa. Let us start with a prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaritamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Dhyana Mulam Guror Mutruhi Puja Mulam Guror Padam Mantra Mulam Guror Moksham Moksha Mulam Guror Krupa Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Para Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Good morning, everyone. If we could take a moment, I would like to take just a brief moment of silence and offer our prayers for those in the southeast of the United States who are suffering some great difficulty right now from flooding and difficulties from the recent storm and weather patterns. We just take a moment, offer our prayers and love and support for our community and our colleagues and neighbors in that part of the country. Thank you. So as Rosa mentioned, today's talk is on prana. This is a talk that is sponsored by Pranada Wellness Center. Pranada means giver of prana. It's the name of our wellness center that is headquartered at TOC, Temple of Compassion in Texas. We have a really great team of dedicated healers, practitioners, and doctors who are committed to the health and well-being of our community and to the education and disbursement of information and knowledge that can help enhance our life, our health, our sadhana, and our spiritual practice. So we try to offer a talk about once a month to every 6 weeks in the fall and winter, up until the time of the spring wellness program that Rosa mentioned. The last talk, Rosa gave a very beautiful talk on the healing modalities of Ayurvedic medicine, and we got to hear about Shirodhara and Marma therapy and many of the other modalities and therapies. Shirodara is one of the therapies that is offered at the Pranada wellness retreat. We also offer osteopathic treatments, which are hands-on medicine, which is used to help evaluate the condition and the health of the prana and the state of the prana. So today's talk is about prana. Let's start by considering what prana is, because sometimes the translation of prana into English doesn't convey the true meaning or the true essence of what prana is. Prana is often translated as breath or sometimes as vital breath. But in actuality, breath is the effect of prana. So prana is actually causing the breath. Swami Vivekananda is known to have said, whatever moves, whatever is seen, manifests in this universe is an effect of prana. Prana is that which causes breath and is the vitality of the breath. So while our breath, our thoracic respiration, our breathing, or movement of the air is deeply connected with prana, it's not prana itself. It's not the true essence of prana. The breath is actually an effect of prana. It's also said in the scriptures in Sanskrit, praniti jivati bukalam iti pranaha. That translates as that which helps this body remain for a long period of time is prana, or vital life force. So this prana is everywhere. We're sitting in an ocean of prana. It's holding us, it's supporting us. It is life itself. Gurudev, Paramahansa Hariharananda, has a series of books called The Ocean of Divine Bliss. And this ocean is prana itself. It's holding us, we're in it, we're immersed in it. And by just acknowledging that essential truth, we come into a deeper relationship with this life force, with this prana that is bathing us, it's creating us, it's sustaining us, it's maintaining us, and it's passing through everything all the time. It's the essence of life. While we could say a lot intellectually about prana, I think it's nice to not try to use the rational mind to define prana too much. Try to allow a little mystery for prana. Try not to get the mind around prana. The mind actually cannot fully understand prana because the mind is an effect of prana itself. So if we allow for a little mystery, we have a little more reverence and we can come into a direct perceptual experience, a direct relationship with this beautiful mystery of life that we call prana. Now, in osteopathic medicine, we sometimes observe the effects of prana through the study of embryology. When we study and observe the growth and development of the embryo as it becomes a fetus and then a small child and then a larger child, a preteen adult, all of these changes that are taking place are actually prana. They're the expressions of prana. And the embryologists have described in great detail the motions and the movements and the effect of prana that the Ayurvedic physicians talked about 7,000 years ago. So the forces of growth and development in an embryo actually become the therapeutic and healing forces in an adult. And the embryologists talked about cohesive forces or forces that push things together, and expansive forces, forces that pull things apart, and motions and effects of prana in all the directions that actually describe the five major pranas that are described in the Ayurvedic and yogic literature. So prana is very, very important when it comes to our health and to our life and to healing. There's no disease and no healing that does not involve the prana in some way. So we have to give this some careful consideration when we're looking to enhance our health and the quality of our life. So traditionally, it is taught that there's five major pranas and five minor pranas. The five major pranas in Ayurvedic medicine are known as prana, udana, samana, apana, and vyana. And these pranas, these five major pranas, each have a location that actually all over the body, but each has a primary location and a primary function. So prana is traditionally thought to primarily be in the head and the brain, and somewhat in the heart, and its primary motion is inward. Udana is often considered to be mostly in the throat, really from the diaphragm up, and its primary motion is an upward motion. And then there's samana, primarily considered to be in the small intestine, and it has a motion of expansion in a lateral dimension across the transverse axis in relationship to the midline of the body. And then we have apana, which is primarily in the lower abdomen, the pelvis, and its primary motion is downward. It tends to have an effect of compressing, pushing in and out. It pushes things out. And then there's Vyana, which is sort of circular type of motion, circulating through the entire body. So these are the five major pranas that are primarily discussed and used in evaluation and treatment in Ayurvedic medicine. And there's five minor pranas. But there's also another way of looking at prana, which could add in our description an 11th prana. So traditionally we say there's 10 pranas, five major, five minor. But we could say there's one more prana. We could call it the cosmic prana, or Krishna prana, or Mahaprana, or in English, the breath of life. So we have this breath of life that's the first motion of life. As the creator, out of love, decided to create a universe, there was a movement of love, a movement of divine love. And it's really talked about in almost every spiritual tradition. In the West, it's called the breath of life. And in Sanskrit, we'll hear it called Krishna prana, Mahaprana, Shakti prana, some type of cosmic prana that then gives rise to the individual prana. then gives rise to the five major pranas that we just mentioned. So this major prana, this breath of life, is always there. It's always passing through everything, creating and sustaining everything. And it's always trying to heal us. It's always trying to bring us into a state of balance. And it is really the true healer. It's the true doctor. It's the true physician. It's the knower of all. It's the creator of this physical form, of this mind, of this body-mind complex. It is the creator. So any doctor really can't take any credit for healing. It's the Mahaprana, it's the breath of life that's really healing. And what we do as physicians, as practitioners in any healing system is to set up the conditions whereby the breath of life can then heal us. So we could ask then, what are these conditions that allow the prana, the Mahaprana, to do its work? Because it's always wanting to heal us, but it just needs the right conditions. So we could say, what could we do to serve the prana that's always serving us? What could we do to allow the prana to do its work a little more efficiently, a little more easily? And we have noticed in clinical practice that there are certain conditions that are essential for the breath of life to do its work. And there are things that we can do in our day-to-day life to support the prana. So a few simple things just in our day-to-day life, starting with our food. A gentle, balanced diet. We'll go in at another talk, we'll go into more detail about the diet. But for now, let us say not to overeat. When we overeat, it puts a lot of strain on apana, and it affects prana itself. And it has a negative effect on our overall balance of our prana if we overeat. So it's said to eat and leave 1/4 of the stomach empty. So not to overeat, and to eat with a sattvic diet. And at another time, we'll go into more detail of what this means and what this looks like. Also, maintaining a balanced lifestyle. So regular exercise, regular activity, and rest in a balanced manner. Not to overwork, not to oversleep, and not to have enough rest. So we need a balance of rest and activity, work and play. This balance allows for the prana to express itself more effectively in our life. The prana by nature is somewhat playful. Prana by nature is playful and joyful. So we should have some time for rest, relaxation, and joy and play in our life. And if we can take and allow our work to be of service and our work to be of joy, then it's not so burdensome and the prana can express itself more naturally. Another thing is an attitude of gratitude and love in our life. We could say that gratitude is great flow. Gratitude allows the prana to flow. If we don't have gratitude, the prana won't flow. And prana wants to flow. Prana wants to move. Prana wants to create. And gratitude allows the prana to flow more fully. So sometimes we'll say gratitude means great flow. So the gratitude is very, very important. When we give an osteopathic treatment, we are looking to establish a set of conditions in the physiology and the body that allows the prana to express itself more naturally, more fully, and with greater potency. We call this set of conditions neutral or neutrality. In spiritual literature, you'll see this called equanimity. So what this looks like, there's a set of conditions, and those conditions include an attitude of joyful receptivity. An attitude of joyful receptivity. So knowing that this prana is there, that we're in this ocean of prana, and we're going to joyfully accept and receive the prana as it's moving through. So an acceptance of what? An acceptance of what life is expressing in the present moment. There may be some conditions in your life that you would like to have different or changed, and that's fine. But those conditions cannot change until we've accepted the conditions in the present moment. So there needs to be an acceptance of what is right now in this present moment. Can we just accept things as they are, as our starting place, before anything changes? With this acceptance, the prana will flow with greater potency, greater vitality. This will allow the change to take place in a more natural way without us bringing so much need for willpower and change in a direction that may be counter to the movement of life. So this acceptance of life, acceptance of the present moment is very important. And this acceptance can only happen in the present moment. So it's what is happening right here, right now, with each breath. When we notice our breath and become present to our breath, we get in touch with the present moment and see life as it's expressing itself right now. Gratitude is also important. We talked about that. That's an aspect of this neutrality that we're talking about. So equanimity, neutrality is a joyful receptivity. It's an acceptance. It's a presence to the present moment. It's a gratitude. And also we need love. And love for something. It can be anything as a starting place. Eventually the love grows when we begin to experience a deeper love for all of life, all of humanity. But it can start with one simple thing, like a plate of spaghetti, or your partner, or the water that you're drinking, or in Kriya Yoga, our breath is an excellent place to start. Now, Guruji, Paramahansa Pragyanandaji, has said there's no equivalent for the word love. Many words that we use, we can say other words that are an approximation of that word. He says the only approximation for the word love is God. So we don't really understand the nature of this love, but by loving our breath and watching our breath and loving one thing, one simple thing, this love starts to grow. The prana starts to flow, and we start to feel the love that the prana is actually bringing us. The prana is serving us, creating us, maintaining us, and it is the movement of love coming from the creation. coming from the Creator. Another aspect that we notice in this equanimity or this neutrality that's essential for the prana to do its work and to heal us is a balanced breath. So what does that mean? A balanced breath? Well, for one thing, the diaphragm needs to be in balance. And we support this through osteopathic treatment. We also support this by just simply observing the breath, not trying to change the breath, but a simple observance of the breath in the present moment will start to bring a balance between the Ida and the Pingala, and the breath can then begin to flow through the Sushumna. And as the breath flows through the Sushumna, we get a neutral, we get a breath that is in balance, and the prana begins to harmonize. It begins to come into balance and express its potential, its potency, which means for us healing, which means for us movement back to our original state of wholeness. We say in Prana and Pranada programs, we say and explain that healing is a movement to wholeness. And when we're in wholeness, we're healed. And that's our natural state, our beingness that happens only in the present moment. So we can really only appreciate prana, understand prana, have a relationship with prana, the breath of life, in the present moment. It's not in the past, it's not in the future. It's only in the present moment. So these are kind of the minimal conditions to receive the therapeutic effect, the benefits of Mahaprana, Krishna Prana, the breath of life as it's passing through everything. As our attitude, so will be our results. And the attitude and the state of mind is very important and affects the breath. It actually even affects the shape of the breath and affects the way that the lungs are used as they receive the breath and exchange the oxygen with the carbon dioxide and the inhalation and exhalation. So another important aspect of prana, of breath, of coming into a deeper relationship with prana and our breath is something I'm sure everyone has heard of called pranayama. Pranayama is the combination of two root words, prana and ayama. I think pranayama is another word that's often misunderstood because of the translations that occur in the English language. Ayama has several meanings. So ayama can mean an extension or elongation. So it could be an extension or elongation of the life energy, of the life force. Ayama also means rest. This was a definition that Gurudev favored. Ayama means rest, so rest of the prana. So with each inhalation and each exhalation, there's a pause. And this pause between each breath and each inhalation, exhalation is actually a rest. And in pranayama, the pause begins to extend and grow longer, and the breath begins to rest. Which brings us actually to the third meaning of pranayama, which is the end of breath. Pranayama brings an end to the breath. The masters and the yogis have told us as the pranayama is practiced and the elongation of the rest grows, the breath comes to rest and there's an end of breath in samadhi. The masters say pranayama is the easiest way to keep the body, the mind, and the senses in a healthy state. And pranayama also regulates the mind and allows us to go beyond thought. Pranayama regulates the mind and allows us to go beyond thought. There's a beautiful reference to pranayama and breath in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 4, verse 30. It's said that some offer their exhalation, prana, as an oblation to the external air, while others offer apana, inhalation, as an oblation to prana. And in this way, they stop the flow of inhalation and exhalation. They practice pranayama. So what would this mean to offer prana to apana and apana to prana? Here in this verse, which is discussing pranayama, there's a good deal of emphasis on two of the five pranas. So earlier we said there's five major pranas: prana, udana, samana, apana, vayana. But here in this verse, as they're talking about thoracic respiration or the movement of the breath, which is an effect of the breath of life, they're talking about two of the pranas, prana and apana. So what is this prana and apana? If we were to look at it in a little more detail, since so much emphasis was placed on these two pranas, it's said in the scriptures, Kriti prana, gudi apana. Kriti prana, gudi apana. That's saying prana is in the heart, apana is in the pelvis. Another way to look at this from a spiritual standpoint, the spiritual heart does not necessarily mean the physical heart that's pumping the blood. The spiritual heart, we're told by the masters, is in the brain and the upper chakras, the upper centers. So prana is in the brain and apana is in the Muladhara center. Each of these five pranas is located also in each of the five centers and chakras. So Hidri prana, gudi apana, is telling us that prana is in the brain, in the head, and in the upper chakras, and apana is in the Muladhara. And this is describing the subtle physiology of the breath, of thoracic respiration. So we actually have two breaths. We have the breath of life that is moving through everything and breathing us into creation. And we have an effect of the breath of life that we call thoracic respiration. It's the movement of the diaphragm, the lungs, and the flow of the air, and the flow of the prana from the outside to the inside and the inside to the outside. So this verse in the Bhagavad Gita is saying that the outside is becoming the inside is becoming the outside, and they're becoming one. And we offer prana to apana and apana to prana. And if we look at the subtle physiology of the breath, When we get very still in meditation and begin to observe the subtle pulsations and the subtle movements of this prana, sometimes we can observe the breath, thoracic respiration, at its very beginning, at its starting point, which is not the movement of the diaphragm. That is actually fairly far down the chain of events of a normal breath, looking at breath from a subtle perspective of the subtle physiology of the prana and apana. When we're in a deep state of relaxation, in a deep state of meditation, when we're about to have a breath, when a breath is actually being given to us, because we're actually being breathed. We're not actually even the breather, we're being breathed by the breath of life. The first motion is this prana. There's a very subtle little quiver, very, very subtle, around the cave of Brahman, which we've discussed on previous discussions. Around the third ventricle of the brain, there's a very subtle movement. And this informs apana to make its normal motion. So apana then moves down from the pelvis. Apana has a downward movement. As apana moves down, samana at the same time moves to the sides across the transverse axis. So the breathing actually in the pelvis opens. The pelvis opens because apana has moved down. This then creates the space for the diaphragm to move. The diaphragm moves down, and this creates a pressure gradient, a pressure change in the lungs, and allows the air to flow in. And so there's an offering of apana to prana. There's a movement of the air flowing in. Now, prana and apana are two poles. Apana is in the muladhara, prana is in the head, and they have a polarity. So they're attracted to each other. So at a certain point, apana wants to return. It begins to rise back to its natural place after having moved down. And this creates exhalation. The air moves out. So the prana is now offered to apana. Now, it's also important to remember that prana and apana, udana, samana, and vayana all come from the same place. They're all an effect of mahaprana. And so there is this stillness that is holding all of these pranas. There is a stillness that the breath emerges from and returns to. So if we observe our breath without trying to change the breath, just observe it with love. We're taught to love our breath. Breath is the outward manifestation of life. If we observe this breath, we can notice that there's a beautiful stillness that the breath emerges from and returns to. And we can really appreciate it in the pause. So there's a pause between each inhalation and each exhalation. So just observing your breath, not only is there a subtle movement of apana down, an opening of the pelvis, a flow of the air, and then a flow of the air back out. This movement is emerging from a stillness and returning to a stillness. And appreciating the stillness is pranayama. Appreciating where the breath is emerging from and returning to is devotion of the breath. And this is pranayama. This allows the breath to rest. This allows the physiology to rest. This will actually change your entire physiology. The prana is always changing our physiology. The prana, when allowed to do its work, is always improving our health, improving our state of physiology, improving our state of mind, improving our thoughts, improving our quality of life in every dimension. So by observing the breath, anything that we observe creates a deeper potential because of the consciousness that's brought. That which is observed gets augmented. So when we observe our breath, we augment the potentiality, the potency of the breath. When we observe the pause and the stillness that the breath comes from and emerges to, returns to, we are augmenting the power of that pause. And that's where the power of the breath rests. We come to a deeper state of rest. This also allows for us to have a greater potential to change our thoughts and our patterns, because every thought, the prana is laying down a groove in the mind. And those thoughts that we repeat the most get a deeper groove, and the prana is able to flow through those grooves more easily. So some thoughts then become habitual. As we synchronize with our prana and our breath, these grooves have the potential and the opportunity to change. And so our thoughts can begin to change. Our habitual thoughts can begin to change. We can begin to change our habits and our mode of thinking. And this in modern science is called neuroplasticity. Modern science is beginning to recognize that the brain, the neurons, the mind actually has the capacity to change, to regenerate, and to become something different. So this breath of life is very beautiful. It's a very beautiful and real phenomenon. And as we begin to synchronize with the pause and the stillness and appreciate this source of the breath, the Ida and the Pingala come into balance. And the breath begins to flow through the Sushumna. And the breath of life begins to move through the Sushumna, and we feel something passing through our center. This is our natural breath. It's our natural state. The breath can be under the influence of the spirit, or the breath can be under the influence of the mind and the ego. It's your choice. When the ego seeks to obtain its own gratifications, it makes the breath, the thoracic breath, go faster. It has to breathe faster to generate the energy that it needs to generate to seek the ego gratification. But when the breath is under the influence of the spirit, when the breath is under the influence of the Atma, it begins to slow down. It begins to get more quiet. the Ida and the Pingala come into balance, and the breath flows through the Sushumna, and the breath slows down. We don't require as much thoracic respiration because we're actually obtaining more nutrients from the prana with each breath, so the breath can naturally slow down. And the masters and the yogis can come to a state of equanimity where inhalation and exhalation are in perfect balance. It is talked about in the scriptures in the breathless state where the diaphragm is no longer moving the breath, but there's a perfect balance between prana and aprana. Prana and apana come into perfect balance, and the air naturally flows. This feeble breath naturally arises. We're taught that this starts by offering prana to apana and apana to prana, by noticing this stillness, this beautiful stillness that the breath emerges from and returns to. This stillness is in this ocean that we're in. There's this ocean of prana we've talked about. We're all in this ocean together. And there's different levels of the ocean. Meditation, contemplation, and prayer takes us to a deeper level of the ocean where prana and apana come to balance, and there's a stillness that everything emerges from and returns to. On the surface of the ocean, there's lots of waves, lots of effects, but as we go deeper into the ocean, it becomes more still. And we come closer to the source of the breath and the source of the breathing. And so that's why we're taught to watch our breath as part of our spiritual practice, as part of our sadhana. This is devotion, devotion to our true self, devotion to the Creator. Everything is breathing. The whole ocean is breathing. The trees are breathing, the rocks are breathing, everything is being breathed into creation by the breath of life. And awareness of our breath and awareness of our prana puts us in contact, in communication with this cosmic breath, with this beautiful breath that's breathing everything. We can come to a deeper appreciation of life, of creation, through this breath. Our mind and our attitudes actually affect the shape of our breath. Each breath has a shape. When we breathe in, you can feel each breath has a different shape and each exhalation has a different shape. This can be confirmed if you take a mirror and put it under your nose. With each exhalation, the condensation of the breath on the mirror will have a particular shape. So each breath has a shape that maintains our attitude. So our attitude and our mind will change the shape of the breath, the quality of the breath, the rate of the breath, which will then maintain the state of the mind and the attitude. Also, the emotions, the mind, and the attitude has an effect on the lungs and the part of the lung that's being used, or the part of the lung that may be compromised. So if a person is in a great state of fear or anxiety, the upper part of the lung, which is primarily related to the vata dosha, will become compromised. And the air won't get to the upper part of the lung so well. If there's a lot of anger and jealousy, the middle part of the lung will get compromised. And if there's too much greed or attachment, the lower part of the lung may get compromised. Sometimes we see this with x-rays. We can see that there's a condition called atelectasis, where the lung has actually shrunk and a part of the lung is not being used as well as another part of the lung. So we prescribe breathing techniques, osteopathic treatment to help reestablish the balance of the lung, which will then lead to an effect and a balance in the mind and the emotions. Breath is life. Breath is the key to your health, to your vitality, to your state of mind. So I don't know if I have much else to say about breath at this time. Are there any questions coming in?
I don't see any questions yet. If anyone has questions for Olixn, please put your questions in the chat and we'll read them.
We can take a few minutes for some questions if there are any. So when we're noticing the subtle breath, sometimes it'll feel like there's a little bit of elongation along the midline as prana moves upward and aprana moves downward. Then this downward motion of apana creates an opening for the diaphragm to move into the space that's created. Then the diaphragm moves, and then the air flows. And we can feel this when we're in meditation. We can feel that the breath is actually an effect of the breath of life. So for this reason, we say we're actually being breathed. The breath of life is breathing us, and thoracic respiration is an effect of the breath of life.
We do have one question that has come in from Cheryl. And the question is, would you suggest when the lungs are compromised, begin with watching the breath, even if it is difficult?
Yes, I would suggest that because the breath that we described of observing where the inhalation arises from, the stillness that the inhalation comes from and returns to, that's the foundation of pranayama. So there's different types of pranayamas for different effects on the health and the breath. But the foundation for all the pranayamas is a balanced breath. And if we don't have that state of balance, the other pranayamas, when practiced, can cause an imbalance. So it's good to have the foundation of just a sense of we're in an ocean of prana. So just start by feeling that we're in an ocean of life force that's holding us, supporting us, and loving us. Just start with that. And then just appreciate the breath as it is right in this moment without trying to change it, without trying to judge it. It's not right or wrong. It's exactly how it needs to be in this moment for the state of health and the state of mind. Then as we observe the breath, in the present moment with love and gratitude, the breath can begin to naturally change and express its natural state and its potency. And then we can begin to appreciate the stillness that the breath is coming from and returning to. This will establish a natural, balanced breath. And this is, by the scriptures, the root of pranayama. This is pranayama, which is the elongation of life force, the rest of the breath, and the offering of prana to apana and apana to prana. That is pranayama. So that then becomes the foundation of your pranayama, upon which any other types of pranayama can be added. So there's this process that we call balanced rhythmic interchange, where you have a stillness and you have two functions that arise out of the stillness, and then the prana moves between these two functions around the stillness. Okay? This is a natural phenomenon that we see everywhere in the natural world. And it is the essence of life. We call it in osteopathy balanced rhythmic interchange, but I've seen recently that this term was used in other spiritual writings as well. And what it is the movement of prana between any two functions. So if you're having a beautiful conversation with your friend, that is a balanced rhythmic interchange where prana is moving between the two around a common fulcrum or a common point, which usually is love. So you both love something and you're discussing what you love. Now the prana is moving between the two of you. And out of that movement comes a third possibility that was not possible without the balanced rhythmic interchange. That's called understanding. So we then understand the other person's point of view, the other person's wisdom is shared with our understanding and wisdom through balanced rhythmic interchange. It moves like a figure of eight. So you could have teacher and student, a common fulcrum, and there's a movement of prana between the two, and a new understanding comes out of that. It doesn't even have to be teacher and student. It can be two friends, two colleagues. It can be a tree and a person. This is how we understand the essence of herbs, is a balanced rhythmic interchange. It requires three conditions are required for a balanced rhythmic interchange. Ida and Pingala need to be in balance. So the Sushumna needs to be flowing. The breath needs to be flowing through the Sushumna. We need to be established in the stillness, the Bindu. We need to be established in the Bindu. And we need to have our meditation needs to be established in a way that it's natural and joyful. It's not an effort. It's just part of who we are. When these three conditions are there and we're in a balanced state, anything we interact with, anything that we observe with our neutrality, we have a balanced rhythmic interchange and we come to a deeper understanding. So when we're trying to understand the essence and the effect of an herb, Arjuna or Ashwagandha, Brahmi, we sit with the plant and there's an exchange of prana. And there's a movement of prana, and there is an illumination and an understanding of the essence of whatever it is that we're listening to. So we're listening. And through the listening and the flow of this prana, this balanced rhythmic interchange, we can come to a deeper understanding. I've digressed in the answer to the question, but to summarize her question, yes, just observing the breath with an attitude of joy and gratitude and appreciating the stillness that it arises from and returns to. Another comment, I think another comment on the stillness. The stillness often is called the bindu the still point, this stillness, from a relative standpoint, there's certain points. Guru Dev used to talk about the atom point in the fontanelle. This was a still point, a stillness that we need to be established in. There's another one in the heart. From an absolute standpoint, the stillness doesn't have a location because it's everywhere. So if we're aware of the ocean of prana without so much body identification, the stillness is everywhere. And by listening to it, we're in touch with it. If we're starting from a relative standpoint of the body, we can notice the stillness either in the heart center or in the atom point. So when we're talking about the stillness that the breath arises from and returns to, we're talking about it from an absolute standpoint, the stillness of the ocean that's holding everything. There's a stillness that's holding every motion, every activity, every thought. All of creation is being held by a beautiful, peaceful, loving stillness. And the best way to get in touch with that, or I should really say, a direct and easy way of getting in touch with that is listening for it. By listening for a stillness that's holding you, we become aware of it and in touch with it, or watching the breath and watching where it arises from and returns to, and sensing, feeling the stillness that it arises from and returns to puts us in touch with this beautiful stillness. And that's pranayama. Sorry for the long answer.
I think all of us are thanking you for that long answer. There's another question that came in, if we have time for another question.
Yeah, I think we have time.
By Rod, he's asking, is there any technique or method that you use or know of that assists with remembering our breath?
Remembering the breath. Well, my spiritual brother Sampat over at TOC has a beautiful breath counter, a little device he holds, and each time he has a breath, he clicks it and it helps him remember. So that works well for him. I find for myself, that's useful if I'm in a really busy circumstance, or in the hospital, for example, where a lot of mental activity is required, but it's a little too mechanical for me. So my preference is to really love the breath, because even if I miss a few breaths, the spontaneous remembrance and the love that comes with that is more beneficial for me. But that's me personally. I'm speaking just from personal experience, and there's many ways. I think it comes down to love. If we recognize, if we step out of breath as a mechanical event and recognize that breath is an effect of the breath of life, breath is the manifestation of life, breath is love, breath is God. If we start thinking of breath in that term, in those terms, it's no longer a mechanical event. And it's become something that you just want to feel, becomes something that you just want to be part of and partake in and witness and feel. For me, that's the most helpful. I'm not an expert on it. I forget my breath. But then something feels like it's missing. Something feels like it's missing. And I'm stopping, like, what's missing? And then the breath just spontaneously comes back through, and it just flows through, and it brings this sense of vitality, this sense of restoration, this sense of rest. And then there's a spontaneous remembrance of breath. So for me, I think it's just coming down to the love and the joy that the breath is. But you can get in touch with Sampat. He can get you one of the breath counters, which some people are using. And it's helpful for me when I'm really super busy, but otherwise I prefer spontaneous remembrance. It's a very beautiful question and one that we can explore together as a community because I'm sure other people have ways they've come across to remember their breath. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question that came through on my phone was someone asking for you to talk maybe a little more about Mahaprana. Is Mahaprana God? And if it is what is breathing us, is it in the container for stillness that holds the other prana, or is it outside of us?
Mahaprana, the great prana, is synonymous with Krishna prana, is synonymous with the breath of life. It's the movement of love. It is the incarnation of love. So God wanted to create and he breathed out creation. This is the breath of life. It's the movement of life. It's the movement of love as it incarnates. It can't be perceived by the rational mind. We have to be in a state of cosmic mind, transcendent of the relative and into the absolute. It's creating and sustaining and actually destroying everything. Guru Vishnu, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Maneva. So that's the breath of life. It's creating, sustaining, and destroying everything all the time. And it needs to be in balance. This creation, maintaining, destroying is going on in your physiology all the time. For example, your bones are being created in every moment. It's not like they were created and that's it. They're being recreated in every moment. And part of that is also a destruction. So there's these specialized cells called osteoclasts, which break bone down. And there's these other cells called osteoblasts that build bone up. They need to be in balance because the bones are always changing their shape. The bones are always changing based on the demand and the function that's required of them. This is coming from the breath of life. So the breath of life has three currents. It has a neutral current, a positive current, and a negative current. It's a electric, it becomes a bioelectric field. But these three currents need to be in balance. So the positive current is activity and expansion. The negative current is condensation and ultimately decay and destruction. And the neutral current is sustaining. So in spiritual life and spiritual practice, we seek to come into contact in a greater capacity with the neutral current of the breath of life. And we perceive that and experience that neutrality easily through the stillness that the breath arises from and returns to. So the simplest way we could say it is the breath of life is the incarnation of love, the movement of love that is creating, sustaining, and destroying everything all the time, and is perceived when we're in a transcendent state as something very soft and subtle that's just passing through everything. And when we're in a very neutral state, and Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna are in perfect balance, we'll feel it passing right through our center and giving rise then to thoracic respiration. Thoracic respiration then will become very feeble very soft and very slow, because what's really sustaining us is the breath of life. It is the true nutrient, the true substance of life. So these other pranas are an effect of the breath of life. The five major and the five minor pranas all arise from the breath of life. So it's really one substance. It's oneness, it's wholeness in diversity. There's multiplicity in wholeness, but there's only one substance, and that is the breath of life. The breath of life gives rise to the five elements and creation. But behind the five elements, the essence of the five elements is the breath of life as one substance.
This is my own little interjection, but I'm thinking of people who are pranacharyas who can exist on prana alone, and it's making more sense to me how that's
Yes.
possible.
So that explains, yes, it explains the people that live on breath. There are breatharians. It also helps to explain the breathless, pulseless state, whereby the breath is in perfect balance. The breath is in perfect balance, and the organism is being sustained by its essence of the breath of life. Are there any other questions?
There's just a lot of gratitude pouring forth from for you, Olene, for giving this talk. I
Thank
think
you.
it's been very balancing for many of us. Thank you.
So I believe there'll be a registration available today for the next Pranada program. Um, we hope to see some of you there. We love participating in that program with you. We have such a great team that's really growing. Some of the best healers and practitioners are on our team. They're incredible staff of committed people from kitchen to administration to the practitioners. It takes a whole community of dedicated people to bring this forth. But a lot of, I've gotten a lot of good comments, received a lot of good comments and feedback from people who have participated. The level of healing that's happening for people, because it's such a unique program, to have osteopathy and Ayurveda in one program, bringing the best of both. Each has its unique understanding and perspective of the breath of life. And that's really what's healing us. That's really what we're working with and seeking to commune with in our programs, is the breath of life. And we talk a lot about these, we have these types of conversations in education about breath, breath of life, and prana, uh, diet, lifestyle. We also have, of course, the cows, the acreage of the TOC, the 108 acres, and the blessings of the gurus. It's makes for a very, very profound and special healing environment that I don't know of anything like it anywhere else in the United States. So if you have an opportunity to join us, please do. We would love to see you. If there's topics you'd like us to talk about in the future, please send them along. We'll try to take those into consideration as we consider future topics. I think our next talk is in November. I want to say the first Saturday in November. I'm not sure. Let me see my calendar. I think it's around November 8th or something. Do you know, Rosa?
I have November 9th. in my
November
calendar.
9th. Yes. Saturday, November 9th. And it'll be at the same time, as far as I know. So please send any wish for any topics you'd like us to cover. This is a community effort, and your participation is important and key to our success in growing and healing as a community, because we don't heal in isolation. We heal in community. We say healing is a movement towards wholeness. Wholeness is everyone. So healing can't happen alone, it happens together. So if there aren't any more questions, I think we can do our closing prayers. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhanjani pashantu, ma kashi dukkha bhagavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamavavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Nice to spend some time with you.